What if I told you that there was an epic conspiracy so massive it could have freed the Philippines from Spanish rule, more than 300 years before the proclamation of Philippine independence in 1898? And this was not just a minor revolt. Some of the most powerful rulers of the islands, with secret alliances stretching from Japan to Brunei, devised a plan so bold it could have changed the course of world history. Indeed, they came closer than you might think, very close to liberating our islands and our people. But sadly, something stopped them in their tracks. So what exactly was the Tondo Conspiracy? Who were the people behind it? And how did it come so close to victory only to crash and burn and end up an epic fail? Mabuhay! Earn Kapampangan, luwid kayo! Welcome to my channel, it's me Kirby Araullo, your friendly Pinoy historian. And in today's video, we're digging deeper into one of the most ambitious yet tragic revolts in our people's history, the Tondo Conspiracy, also known as the Revolt of the Lakans. Since many of you requested, today's topic is actually an expanded and updated version of the ones I made many years ago. In fact, it is also the focus of my second book published back in 2021, Tondo, Slavery, and the Revolt of the Lakans. And I'm actually currently working on an expanded second edition of this book, so stay tuned for that. But for now, without further ado, let's dive into this epic conspiracy. To fully understand the Tondo Conspiracy, we must first need to look at Tondo's role in Philippine history, long before it became a district in modern-day Manila. Today, many people recognize Tondo as a densely populated district in the city of Manila, often associated with urban poverty. But unknown to many, up until the 1500s, Tondo was the beating heart of a powerful maritime kingdom, known as Luzon, or Lusong in Kapampangan, and it was a center of wealth and political influence, with trade connections to China, Japan, the Arab world, and the many sultanates and kingdoms of Southeast Asia. Pre-colonial Tondo and Manila were interconnected yet distinct polities. Tondo was the older capital, with roots in the indigenous and Hindu-Buddhist past, while Manila across the river was founded and fortified by the Muslim rulers, Raja Salalila of Luzon and his wife, Dayang Ismeria of Brunei and Sulu. Together they strengthened Manila Bay as a global trade hub, forming the core of Luzon's thriving thalassocracy. Now before the Spanish conquest in the 1570s, Luzon's power rested on its dominance in regional commerce, trading goods like rice, gold, beeswax, deerskin, firearms, and many more. And its connections with China, Japan, and the Islamic kingdoms like Brunei and Sulu cemented its influence in the region. In fact, the ruling families of Luzon often strengthened these ties through royal intermarriages across Southeast Asia. Now Manila's impressive fortifications and connections to global trading networks, including China and the Islamic world, made it highly attractive to European powers. In 1571, the conquistador Miguel Lopez de Legazpi led a second Spanish expedition to seize Manila. Yet unknown to many today, the paramount rulers, Raja Matanda, the king of Luzon, his younger brother Lakandula of Tondo, and their nephew, the crown prince Raja Sulaiman of Manila, fiercely resisted the combined forces of the Spanish conquistadors and their Visayan allies. But after several battles, they were forced to negotiate peace, and Manila soon became the heart of the Spanish colonial government and the hub of the Manila galleon trade, connecting the Philippines to the Americas. Yet, despite the peace, resistance persisted. Luzon's elites, particularly the Lakans, continued to balance maintaining peace while challenging Spanish colonialism. And the revolt of the Lakans was one attempt to reclaim their sovereignty and restore Luzon's powerful maritime kingdom. And it was within this context of economic and political tension that the seeds of the Tondo Conspiracy were planted. Now let's meet the people behind this conspiracy, the valiant Datus and Lakans. First we have Agustin de Legazpi, the paramount ruler of Tondo and a grandson of Lakandula's brother. Agustin was not just aiming to reclaim political control. By disrupting the Spanish-controlled Manila-Acapulco galleon trade, Agustin threatened to cut off Spain's source of wealth and restore Luzon's rightful place in global trade networks. Agustin also had powerful allies. His marriage to a daughter of Sultan Muhammad Hassan strengthened ties between Luzon and Brunei, providing him with both diplomatic and military support. Agustin's cousin Magat Salamat of Tondo and Hagonoy was another key figure in the conspiracy. Known for his compassion and strong bond with the people, Magat Salamat was driven by a deep sense of duty to liberate the people from Spanish rule. And as the youngest son of Lakandula, he witnessed the suffering under colonialism and sought to restore his people's dignity and sovereignty. Magat Salamat's older brothers, Datu Junicio Capulong of Candaba and Datu Felipe Salonga of Polo, also played significant roles in the conspiracy. Both were respected leaders and rulers in their regions, and their influence helped gather more support for the revolt. And Agustin's own brothers, Datu Gabriel Tuambasan and Datu Geronimo Basi, were also crucial to the conspiracy. As nephews and adopted sons of the fierce Raja Sulaiman of Manila, their involvement further solidified familial ties across Luzon, uniting different regions in a coordinated effort against Spanish rule. And together, these cousins, the Lakans of Tondo and Manila, along with another cousin, Datu Martin Pangan, formed the core leadership determined to unite the islands against the Spaniards. Now unknown to many, the plot extended beyond Tondo, involving present-day provinces like Pampanga, Bulacan, Batangas, Laguna, the islands of Mindoro, Palawan, and the Sultanate of Sulu, along with their allies in Japan and the Sultanate of Brunei. So how exactly did the Lakans plan to overthrow the Spaniards, the mighty Spanish Empire? Despite being minimized in colonial records, the plot was actually sophisticated and well-coordinated. To avoid arousing Spanish suspicion, the Lakans disguised their meetings as festive banquets, attended by people from all walks of life, across the different social classes. And while often portrayed as an upper-class revolt, the conspiracy spanned all social classes, involving everyone from Philippines to foreign allies. And these festivities and gatherings allowed the Lakans and the Datus to plan in plain sight, while the Spaniards remained unaware. A key element of their plan was building strategic alliances. The Lakans reached out to their long-standing trade partners, the Japanese. Juan Gallo, a Japanese sea captain, played a crucial role in facilitating these discussions. Agustin de Legazpi convinced his Japanese partners that removing the Spaniards would benefit both Luzon and Japan economically. In addition to Japan, the Lakans secured the commitment of the Sultanate of Brunei, and Magat Salamat also gained the support of the Datus in the Sultanate of Sulu. Now unknown to many, Sultan Muhammad Hassan of Brunei had already begun preparations, building warships to aid in the liberation of Manila. Although internal conflicts in Brunei had delayed earlier assistance, the Sultanate remained a key part of the conspiracy, ready to send military forces when the time was right. Unknown to many, in 1587 alone, Agustin de Legazpi and his cousins Martin Pangan and Magat Salamat sent weapons and supplies like firearms to both the Sultanate of Brunei and their allies in Japan. These presents came along with warnings of imminent Spanish invasions. Spain's imperial ambitions to expand their Asian colonies beyond Luzon and the Visayas was no secret. In fact, in 1578, just a decade prior to this conspiracy, Spain fought a brutal war with Brunei, in which the Sultanate emerged victorious in driving out the Spaniards from Borneo, and thus, along with Mindanao's relentless resistance, limited Spain's presence to Luzon and the Visayas. The overall strategy was as ambitious as it was meticulous. The plan called for a coordinated surprise attack on Manila, with the Japanese and Bruneian forces approaching the city under the guise of peaceful traders during the day. But by nightfall, they would strike against the Spaniards within Intramuros, Manila's fortified walled city. The Bruneian fleet, disguised as merchant vessels, was set to dock in Cavite before launching their assault against Manila. Meanwhile, the local warriors, led by the Datus and the Lakans of Luzon, would mobilize on land surrounding the city, while the indigenous Kapampangan fleet would also prevent any Spanish reinforcements from arriving by sea. Now, with both land and sea routes blocked, the Lakans aimed to trap the Spaniards within the walls of Intramuros, and thus forcing them to surrender or face annihilation. This was not just a local rebellion, it was a pan-Asian effort to restore Luzon as a powerful player in Southeast Asia, a kingdom free from Spanish domination. But sadly, this epic conspiracy did not go as planned. By February 1588, news had reached Luzon that English pirates were preparing to attack the Spaniards in the Philippines. The Lakans saw this as their moment. They hoped to exploit the chaos between European forces, waiting patiently for the English to make their move, while secretly gathering their own forces. But sadly, not a single English pirate arrived in Luzon. Now, with the anticipated distraction gone, the Lakans were forced to reassess their plans. Soon after a diplomatic mission led by Magat Salamat along with his cousin Dato Agustin Manugit and his brother-in-law Dato Juan Banal set sail towards Borneo. Their mission was critical. They were tasked with securing military aid from Sultan Muhammad Hassan of Brunei to support the uprising against the Spaniards. Along the way to Brunei, they stopped by the islands of Calamianes in today's Palawan province to rally more local leaders to their cause. Indeed, Datu Sumailob of Cuyo pledged 2,000 warriors to the conspiracy, and after Palawan they reached the islands of the Sulu Sultanate, where the Datus of Jolo also committed to joining the uprising. These alliances would have provided the much-needed military strength to launch the revolt and overwhelm the Spaniards. But then came the betrayal. On October 26, 1588, while in Calamianes, Magat Salamat and his companions were betrayed by Antonio Surabao, a local who had infiltrated the conspirators' circle. Surabao revealed the entire plot to his master, a Spanish officer named Pedro Sarmiento, which ultimately led to the unraveling of the conspiracy. And the betrayal was not just political, it was deeply personal. Surabao had gained the trust of the Lakans, standing beside them as they planned their bold uprising, only to shatter those bonds by exposing them to the colonizers. Imagine the shock and horror the Lakans must have felt when they realized that they had been betrayed by someone who had stood beside them. And the Spaniards retaliated swiftly and brutally. Agustin de Legazpi and Martin Pangan were executed gruesomely. They were beheaded and quartered. Their bodies were chopped into pieces, and their severed heads were placed in cages for public display as a stark warning to any would-be rebels. The beloved Prince Magat Salamat, along with other conspirators, was also executed for his role in the conspiracy, while other leaders such as Junicio Capulong of Candaba, Pedro Balingit of Pandacan, Pitonggatan of Tondo, Felipe Salonga of Polo, and many more were not spared from punishment. These Lakans and Datus, along with their sons and followers, were exiled across the Pacific Ocean to Acapulco in what is now Mexico. And these exiles were among the earliest people from the Philippines recorded to have settled in the Americas. The Spaniards hoped that by banishing the remaining leaders, they would squash any further ambitions of rebellion. The betrayal and downfall of the Tondo Conspiracy was a crushing blow to one of the most organized efforts to overthrow Spanish rule in the Philippines. The Spaniards had not only succeeded in eliminating the key leaders of the revolt, but they had also ensured that their brutal display of power would serve as a chilling reminder to others who might consider rising up against them. Yet, despite this devastating defeat, the spirit of resistance against colonial oppression was far from extinguished. Indeed, the seeds of rebellion had been planted, and it was only a matter of time before they would take root again. So at first glance, on the surface, it may seem that the Lakans were merely fighting to protect their wealth and to protect their status. But in reality, the revolt was driven by a much deeper cause: the fight against brutal exploitation under colonialism. Before the Spaniards arrived, the Philippine system in pre-colonial Philippines was a form of servitude tied to debt, social obligations, or temporary circumstances. The Philippines were not slaves in the Western sense. In fact, they had rights. They could own property, and they often worked their way out of bondage. Unlike in the West, their humanity was respected and protected. Many lived in their own homes, raised their families, and had freedoms unheard of in European chattel slavery. Although not perfect, the Philippine system was flexible, offering paths to freedom and social mobility. But this all changed drastically under Spanish rule. The Spaniards may not call it slavery, but their colonial policies and requirements of forced labor was a far more crippling form of exploitation in comparison to the Philippine system. The Poliservicio policy forced native men into grueling labor. Men aged 16 to 60 were conscripted to work without pay, often in the most dangerous conditions. Many were sent into faraway places, forced into deadly labor across the seas. And unlike the pre-colonial system, there was no escape and no path to freedom. This forced labor took a heavy toll on the families, as young men were torn from their communities for months or even years at a time. For many, the brutal conditions meant that being conscripted was almost a death sentence. Adding to the exploitation was the encomienda system, in which vast lands were taken from the indigenous people and given to the Spaniards as private properties. Land in pre-colonial Philippines was communal, shared by the community and not a private property. Now in the new system, under colonialism, the Spanish encomenderos were allowed to demand tribute and forced labor from the local population. As a result, the datus not only lost their political power, but also saw their people suffer and forced to work under even harsher conditions for the Spanish overlords. Now for the Lakans, the Tondo Conspiracy was not just about reclaiming political power, it was about protecting their people from a system of dehumanizing exploitation. They saw their communities suffering under polo y servicio and the encomienda system. They wanted to end the suffering and restore the dignity of their people. Indeed, the revolt of the Lakans was an early, organized effort to resist labor exploitation imposed by the Spaniards. And though it failed, the Lakans laid the groundwork for future uprisings. It was a fight for dignity, for the rights of the natives to live free from exploitation. Okay, so what do you think would have happened if the Lakans had succeeded? Let me know what you think in the comments below. Now back to our topic. Let's dive into the enduring legacy of this incredible conspiracy. Although the revolt of the Lakans ultimately failed, its legacy continues to resonate in the broader history of resistance against colonialism. Now, this revolt is often viewed in isolation, but unknown to many, in reality, it was part of a larger, interwoven web of resistance. In fact, just a few years earlier, the Candaba Revolt of 1585 to 1586 had taken place in La Pampanga, and this was led by Don Juan de Manila and Don Nicolas Managuete, both members of the Royal House of Manila and cousins of the Lakans. The Candaba Revolt was sparked by growing resentment towards the Spanish encomienda system, which had stripped indigenous leaders of their authority and subjected the Kapampangan people to harsh exploitation. Though smaller in scale, this revolt laid the groundwork for later uprisings, like the Tondo Conspiracy. Both were driven by the same goal: to expel the Spaniards and reclaim sovereignty and liberate their ancestral lands. The Tondo Conspiracy was also significant in its scope. It was not just a local revolt. It involved a vast network of intricate alliances with Brunei, Japan, and other indigenous leaders across the islands. The Lakans sought to unite Luzon and neighboring islands in a coordinated effort to overthrow the Spaniards. And although the plot was uncovered, it marked one of the earliest organized and large-scale attempts to challenge European colonialism in Southeast Asia. Now fast forward more than 300 years later to 1896, and in the same place where Magat Salamat and his allies had conspired against the Spaniards, in Tondo, another revolutionary movement was born, the Katipunan, led by Andres Bonifacio of Tondo. Like the Lakans before him, Bonifacio and the Katipuneros sought to overthrow the Spaniards and liberate the Philippines. The Katipunan drew on the same themes of resistance and unity that had motivated the Lakans. Both movements aimed to unite Filipinos across ethnic and regional lines, and both saw their leaders brutally persecuted by the Spaniards. But while the Tondo Conspiracy ended in betrayal, the Katipunan succeeded in sparking a revolution that ultimately led to the independence of the Philippines in 1898. The revolt of the Lakans is a powerful reminder that our ancestors did not passively accept colonial rule. They fought back again and again. The spirit of resistance that drove the Lakans lived on and was passed down through generations. In fact, many may not know this, but within the 300 years of Spanish rule over the Philippines, there was over 200 recorded uprisings against the cruelties of colonialism, over 200 revolts to drive out the Spaniards even before Jose Rizal and Andres Bonifacio were even born. Now, despite its failure, the Tondo Conspiracy, or the Revolt of the Lakans, holds a crucial place in Philippine history. It challenges the colonial narratives that have often minimized the significance of early revolts, reminding us that the fight for freedom and dignity has deep roots in our past, and that the fiery blood of that resistance still burns bright in our veins today. And although the conspiracy ended in tragedy, it remains a powerful testament to the courage of our ancestors and their defiance against exploitation. Their unyielding spirit of resistance, born in the fires of struggle, continues to light the path and inspire us today. Indeed, if we do not know our own histories, if we do not embrace our own roots, then we lose sight of who we are and we lose the ability to shape a brighter future. And as the saying goes, ang hindi marunong lumingon sa pinanggalingan ay hindi makakarating sa paroroonan. Or in Kapampangan, nung emeyag yung balikdan ng kaya kang milabas, emeyag yung dasan ng kaya kang bukas. If you found this video insightful, and if you learned something new, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and hit the bell icon so you don't miss out on any of my upcoming videos about our people's history, culture, and everything in between. And of course, one last thing before I go, this channel would not be possible without the love and the support of all my subscribers, patrons, and viewers like you throughout these years. Your support has kept this channel growing for the past 12 years, and I'm truly grateful for each and every one of you. And if you're new here, I'd love for you to join our growing community. You can support the channel by becoming a member on YouTube or a patron on Patreon. You can also grab copies of any of my books, coloring books, ebooks, and merch, all about the fascinating history and the colorful cultures of the Philippines and Southeast Asia. Check out the links below and order your copies today. And that is it for me today. Maraming salamat po. Orin Kapampangan, dakal pong salamat kay Kongan. Ening bahasa sug magsukol tuwid kay mo. See you next time when Tagalog kita kits ening Kapampangan. Mikitix ening bahasa Melayu. Jum palagi.